Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for the second video of my series One Die 4 Ways, where I'm using this die once a week for 4 weeks in 4 different ways. Here is the card for today. I decided to break up the die into pieces for something a little different. So here is the die. It's called Wandering Vine Squares. And I'm going to start with my background. I'm using Distress Oxide inks, and I'm taking a piece of, this is mixed media paper by Canson XL. And I'm putting some oxide ink starting in the middle, and I'm working my way out. And the blue, the purple to blue worked out just fine. You can see how messy this is. It's terrible. It's got all these lines in it, but I'm not worried about it because they're going to go away once I add water. And then I added pink to the outside. I'm not sure what made me put blue and pink together. Obviously, they're not mixing very well, but it turned out to be okay. But typically, I wouldn't put those colors together. But I kind of wanted pink on the outside. So anyway, I'm not being too careful about this. I'm being pretty messy, and I'm going to go back in and add a little bit more of the blue because I felt like I kind of put a little bit too much pink on top. So you can see where they overlap that it's not a very pretty color, but it's okay. We're going to keep going. So I'm going to spray this with water, and I'm going to have my heat tool handy because the heat tool also helps you to kind of move the water around, blend the colors together, and then you get more of a watercolor look instead of just 3 circles. And so I'm just speeding this up, and you can see the water reacting with the oxide inks, and it always works better on watercolor paper, so I highly recommend that. So you can also see that the water is starting to kind of create these really cool stains in this background. Now I have this puddle kind of up in the corner there that I'm not too happy with. You can see how dark it's getting because the blue and the pink don't mix very well. So I'm just going to grab a tissue and blot that so that I just get kind of a pretty water stain. And now that it's drying even more, you can see those water spots, and they look really pretty. A nice effect with the oxide inks. So after I'm done drying it, it's almost completely dry. I'm going to spray it again with some water, and this is going to give me more of a reaction, and I'm going to get smaller droplets, and it's going to look a little more textured. And when I fast forward it, you can really see as it dries that you get these really pretty dots and a textured look. So it's also curling really badly, and this happens a lot with this paper because it's super thin, but I'm going to do something to flatten it out a little bit better. I was thinking I was going to have to go back and add more color to that pink-blue combo that was kind of messy in the middle, but I kind of liked it, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. And now I'm just going to take some water. I'm just going to use the nozzle of my spray bottle. I'm just going to tap it, and this will give me some pretty large droplets. So if you want smaller droplets, you should use a brush, but I'm just going to make it kind of messy, drop it down, and I'm going to wait a second here. This is real time, so you can see how long I've waited, and not too long. And so I'm just going to let it react a little bit, and then I'll take a tissue, and it'll remove a lot of the color wherever the water drops are. So I'm just going to do this until I pick up all the water. Now the steps I go through next time I create this card may be completely different. It just depends on what look you get. It's always going to be different every time. So I'm going to spray this again, not really to react with the ink, but to flatten out my cardstock, because when it gets damp, it's going to flatten out. You can see it uncurling as we watch it. But I was going to put it under a block, but it was too wet. I put too much water on it. So now I'm just dabbing up some of the water so that it truly is damp. It doesn't have any puddles in it. And I'm also sprayed the back a little bit just to make sure that the water was, the paper was thoroughly damp, but you don't want any puddles. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this under an acrylic block just to kind of weight it down. And so I'm going to push this off to the side, and I'm going to let it dry for some time and work on the rest of the card. I cut my die 3 times out of some Neenah Solar White cardstock. You can see it's kind of warped a little bit from so much use. If you have trouble getting your die cut out, you can use a paper piercer and just kind of go along the lines of the flower. I felt that that helped me a lot. And then also you can run it through your Big Shot with a dryer sheet, and that'll also help the die to come out. All right, so what I'm going to do is cut off the top 3 boxes, or 4 boxes I guess, right in the middle of 2 of these. And I'm going to push those off to the side for later. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this big box here, and then I'm going to cut off the other 3 boxes, the smaller boxes. So the first time I go through this, I'm just going to cut off just roughly, just get those big pieces out of the way. And once I get those big pieces out of the way, then I can sort of cut a little closer to the edge so that it's a nice smooth cut. So you can see once I get that done, you can still see I've got those boxes, those little pieces left. So I'll just carefully go in, and I think that this is better if you have some small paper snips. And I would put it as close to the stem as you can, but make sure that the tip of your scissor is nowhere near the box, because when you close the scissors, you could end up cutting the box, and it's all very thin here, so you have to be a little bit careful. But I think these are paper snips by Stampin' Up! And I love them. They're my favorite scissors. Okay, so once I get that done on this particular one, then I'm going to move on to the other one that I cut. So the two top pieces are both going to get all of these squares cut off. So I'm going to do the same exact thing, cut all these 3 squares off. These 2 pieces are going to form the main part in the middle, but I still want to get some flowers around the edge, so I'm bringing back the bottom pieces that I cut off, and I'm just going to use my scissors to cut off the flower that's in that upper right square. Just cut as close to the flower as you can on both of them. And then I'm going to take that third die that I cut out, and I'm going to cut the flowers on the top half. So the very, very top one is kind of a medium-sized flower. And then I've got a tiny little one here, and I'm going to cut that out. And then I've got one more, and it's the very, very large one in the upper left. And I'm going to cut that one off. And that one's actually going to go in the center of my card. So I have 5 loose flowers in total. Now let me show you how these are going to go together. So where I snipped them off, I'm going to join them together. And that's how I'm going to place it in the center of my card. All right, so now let's take a look at my watercolor, and it is completely flat, and it looks beautiful. It is not warped at all, but it is still a tiny bit damp. And I didn't think it was a big deal, so I went ahead and let it kind of completely dry, and it ended up warping. So it curled back up even though it was just a tiny bit damp. So what I did was I spritzed it a little bit more. I put a paper towel under it, and I left it overnight, and it flattened out completely. You can see how great it looks right now. But still, it was still a tiny, tiny bit damp, even though it was sitting out overnight. So I'm not sure you're going to be able to get it completely, perfectly not warped, because as it sat on my craft mat, it did warp just a tiny bit. But based on what it was like at the beginning, this is way, way better. I'm going to adhere my pieces by holding them with a tweezer and putting some two-way glue on the back. And I want to make it so that the center of these 2 boxes, when I put them on the card, is right in the middle of my purple. And again, they're going to meet exactly where I snipped them off the bottom part. So I'll do that same thing on the other side, and my swirlies are on the top and on the bottom. So just place that right there and press it down, and two-way glue works great. Not too much glue comes out, and it perfectly holds to the cardstock, so you can see up close how this looks. Next, I'm going to stamp my sentiment. I'm going to use my MISTI. I'm using this all-to-new set called Sentiments and Quotes. It's a really old set, but it's got some great sayings in it. And I'm just going to ink it up with some Hero Arts black ink and stamp it underneath. And I'm going to center it as best I can between those 2 boxes. Now I'm going to trim it off so that I have a 1/8 of an inch mat all the way around. And then I'm going to use my ATG tape runner to go right as close to the edge as I can with the tape. And I'm going to adhere this to a Hero Arts black note card, which is black on the outside and white on the inside. I love these note cards. I always keep a couple of packages on hand. Now I'm going to add those loose flowers that I cut. So I've arranged them how I want them, and I'm going to pick them up with a pick-me-up stick. I'll put a little dot of the Ranger Multi-Medium Matte and then place it back down. And this glue dries matte, so it's not glossy, and you won't see it if it ends up coming out the side of the flower. So once I get that last one down, I'm going to do a little bit more detail. I'm going to take my Copic multi-liner, and this is a 0.3, and I'm going to line the inside of the box. So I'm really just drawing right up against my die cut, and I'm using it as my guide. So I'm just going to do the inside of the box. I'm not going to go to the vine, down the vine, or anything like that, just the inside of the box. And I really think that this makes the boxes pop off the center of the card. My flowers are looking a little plain, so I wanted to add a little bit more detail to those. I'm going to take the same pen and I'm going to add some dots. So a few dots going up the leaves, and then a bunch of dots in the center of all of these flowers. So I'm just going to be careful that I go down and up vertically so I avoid having sort of lines. I definitely want circular dots. and I'm going to finish off with this last leaf here. Now for my center flower, which I haven't adhered yet, I'm going to color the whole thing with 110 Copic marker. This is a great marker to have on hand because it is extremely dark and black, and when you color solid, it's very smooth, it doesn't pill up your paper, and it just looks great. So I'm going to put this flower right in the center with my same Ranger Multimedia matte. And then since this is black, I'm going to add some white gel pen dots to the center. And that is the card for today. So something definitely different that you may not have seen when you looked at this die. I hope you like it, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.